All right, great. I think we have a great number of people on, so we'll welcome this Saturday morning to our SRHacks Workshops. We're going to start with our workshop number 1, which is for Microsoft MakeCode for the coding competition. So my name's Surath. I'm an exec on Science Rendezvous, and here my colleague on SR, Eduardo. Do you want to give a quick hi?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm going to be the lead for the programming competition, and hopefully this workshop helps a lot of you.
Great. All right, let's get started. So yeah, Eduardo and I are going to be going back and forth, leading on this workshop. So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to look at the coding workshop, which covers Microsoft MakeCode and also the MicroBit hardware that you're going to be coding on. So first, we're going to talk about, well, what is a MicroBit? What's Microsoft MakeCode? And then the basics of coding on MakeCode. So this will include coding with the concept of using blocks in coding, and then examples to kind of guide you along. Then we'll have a brief demo kind of showcasing how you can make a project using all these blocks on Microsoft MakeCode, and then some information about how you'll submit your projects as well for the SRHack competition. So first, what is a MicroBit? Well, a MicroBit is essentially just a pocket-sized computer. It's just, you can think of the computer or your phone or whatever you're on right now. It's something like that, except very miniaturized for the specific tasks that we want to do for our projects. So here's just what it looks like from the front and the back. On the front, you can see that there's this kind of display and some buttons. On the back, it's kind of the guts of all the computing power. So specifically, a MicroBit is what's called a microcontroller. So what this means is that it has a few components that are pretty specific on it. So it has a processor. So that's the computer, the brains of this machine. It's a thing that does all the computing and makes all this stuff happen. So on the back, you can see it actually. The MicroBit's really nice because it actually labels all of the different components. So you can see the processor's kind of there on that top left-hand side, that square black block. It also has sensors, such as an accelerometer. That's also labeled on the back here. And that's, if you're shaking your MicroBit, it can actually tell that it's being shaken. It has things called inputs. So that's you're actual physically inputting something into the MicroBit to make it do something. So on the front, you see the A and B buttons. Those are 2 examples of inputs. And then finally, it also has outputs. So those are things that if you were to input something into the MicroBit, it'll show you or do something itself. And so, for example, having those LEDs, those lights on that display in the front, showing a smiley face right now in this picture, that's an output the MicroBit can give you. So now you have that MicroBit, but how do you actually connect to it? How do you code on it? How do you do anything with it? Well, it's actually really basic. So you write the code for the MicroBit on your computer, your personal computer, and you can upload it to the MicroBit with just a USB cable. So your code is what's called software, and that's going to tell the MicroBit, which is hardware, what to do. And so that's how software can interact with hardware. It's pretty much you coding. You send that code through this USB cable to the MicroBit, and then the MicroBit will do what your code told it to do. So we're going to be using a language called Microsoft MakeCode. There's lots of different languages. You've probably heard of things like Python or Java, things like that. Those are all just different types of coding or coding languages you can use. We're going to use something called Microsoft MakeCode.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So as Russ said, MicroBit it's going to be the language that we're going to be using. But what makes it such a cool coding language to use is it's a block-based approach to actually writing out the code, which makes it super accessible for anybody that's trying to get into coding or trying to start learning the logic behind it. But that's not only the cool thing, it's also really easy to get started with it. The only thing you need is pretty much just a computer and internet. In fact, because most of you are probably are watching this through a computer and probably have internet, I'm gonna drop this link on the chat, which is a link to the browser interface, which is what you guys will be using to make your project. And you can go right now and log in to see if you want to follow along with us as we go through this workshop. So let's take a look at the interface now.
Right. Just very quickly, I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming through the chat and the Q&A. Eduardo and I will take big questions at the end of the session in the last 10 minutes. But if there's any technical questions of trying to get onto MakeCode, we'll try to address those as we go. Great.
Alrighty, so here we have here three main components of the interface. The first one being the virtual microbit, which is great because this will allow you to test your code without actually having to have a physical microbit to test it on. The second component is actually the list of blocks, which is where you guys are gonna go through and trying to figure out what blocks are gonna help you to put together your program. And lastly, the third component is going to be the canvas. And the canvas is where you actually write out the code. And sometimes you might encounter while writing out your code that it's not behaving like you want it to. And sometimes that's because you might not understand how a certain block works. So how do we get around that? So it's really easy, actually. You can actually just right-click on the block that you might not understand that well and click on this help button. And what I'll do is I'll display a little description box beside it. I'll tell you how the block works, and it will actually go a step ahead and actually show you examples of how you might want to use that block. So because of this, I really want everyone to feel comfortable exploring all the blocks that are accessible to you to try and to put together the most unique project that you can. And there's also more resources available, of course, aside from this, available on the website, where you can look at the description of these blocks in more detail. So let's go ahead and yeah. So MakeCode is actually not just restricted to the microbit. It actually has a variety of applications, and we certainly hope that after SRHacks that you guys take the time to further improve on your coding skills and explore these other applications as well.
Great. All right. So thanks, Eduardo. And so now let's talk about these blocks and how we'll actually code with them. So when you go on the MicroBit interface, we're going to go into it pretty soon so everyone can kind of follow along. You'll see all these different categories for different types of blocks, and each of them have different functionality that you can then combine together. So like Lego, like any types of blocks, we're sticking them together to do different things. So we're going to go through each block, what they're used for, and examples of things you can do.
Perfect. So let's get started with the basic block. So the basic block, what it allows you to do is very simple. It allows you to control the flow of events, and it also allows you to control what's being displayed on the screen. So let's take an example of this to kind of show you how this would work.
All right. So first, before you get into that, Eduardo, this is the MicroBit interface. So if you click that link in the chat, or if you had the link already, you're going to be taken to something like this, where there's actually a lot of tutorials here that you can look at. Different videos and things like that as well, but we're going to focus right here on the top of your projects. So you can click on new project here, and now you can just give your project a name. So we're going to call SRHacks Workshop.
Good name.
Yep, it works. And then create it, and then we get to this screen. So hopefully everyone was able to access this, so you guys can follow along as well. And yeah, if anyone had any problems, just let us know in the chat. So yeah, here we are. So Eduardo, if you want to tell us about basic.
For sure. So here we have the two main blocks that are composed of the basic group of blocks, which is the on start and the forever. So on start is actually, you guys are going to be using a lot because it's actually how you initialize things at the beginning of the program. So everything you put in here will occur right when the program turns on. So for example, in this scenario, if you want, for example, for a happy face to turn on at the beginning, we might want to go in and to the basic blocks and get a display image, and then maybe just get and then we can put that on the start, and then right at the beginning we'll have like either a smiley face or just like a regular shape. But the idea here is that when you press start, this is what's going to show up. So then the next step here is to then say, well, what happens after that? So in the forever block, what it's going to do is that in the background, once the project starts, it's going to start updating things in the background as the program continues. So that's cool. We have a smiley face at the beginning. Maybe you wanted to like change shapes. So we'll go back to the basic blocks and go into show icon. And then we'll have a heart that will be in the forever loop. And then we'll take another show icon block. And then we'll pick just a random shape for that one and put that underneath the heart that we just put. So what's going to happen here is when you start the code, the smiley face will show up first, and then it'll start cycling between the two displays that we have in the forever loop. So it's very simple. So let's go ahead and continue, and let's take a look at the next set of blocks.
Great. All right. Just making sure everyone can still see our screen that we're sharing and was able to see Microsoft MakeCode. If you just want to type in the chat, just to make sure everyone can see everything that was going on. Great. Awesome. Getting a few confirmations there. Good. Great. All right. So next, we're going to talk about the next set of blocks, which are input blocks. So input blocks just wait for the user to do something on the microbit. So sometimes they can just wait for a condition to be met, like pressing a button, or shaking the microbit itself. So for example, there's a block called like this, which it has a shake. You can choose if you actually want to shake it, or if the logo is up or the logo is down, looking at kind of the orientation of the microbit in actual physical space. And you can make it do something when it has been shaken. For example, another example is actually just pressing a button like button A for it to show different things. So we're going to go back to our microbit interface to actually go through this in a bit more detail. So give us one sec. All right, so I'm going to delete these for now so we can start from scratch. Let's reset it. And so while we're going through this interface too, we'll try to label out a few of these buttons here that you can see on the microbit side, just so you know what they do. So let's start with actually the button press. Let's just do that one. So we click on input. It brings up this panel of all the different inputs that you can give. For some examples, there is a new version of the microbit called the MicroBit v2. So those are functions that'll only work on this version 2 microbit. And they're listed down here below that little title there. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if you have an older version of a microbit, let's say, for example. But okay, so let's first take out this button. So on button A, so A is that left-hand button, you can always click on this drop-down menu to change the type of button. So you can either click A, or you can click B, or you can click A and B at the same time. If you click A and B at the same time, so on a computer, you can't press those 2 buttons at the same time with your mouse. So it actually just creates this little virtual A plus B button. But in real life, you'd be pressing both buttons on your microbit. But let's just go back to A for now. So let's say we want to show something like an icon. Let's show a heart again. So we can snap that block in. The block shapes make it really nice that it looks like it it fits in there. So you hear also the click as the block gets clicked into place. And now looking at the left-hand side of the microbit here, if we click on button A, we see a heart appear. So that's essentially it for inputs. And there's a lot of different types you can use, like shaking. To shake the microbit, you can essentially, when you pull this out, it'll refresh. And now there's a little shake button, but also you can shake the microbit by moving your mouse around the little micro bit picture there. Anyway, so that's kind of an intro to inputs. So now let's check out music blocks.
So music blocks are really cool because it allows you to actually create melodies on your own, and they also allow you to control or edit the beats or the volume of the melody itself. And lastly, what it allows you to do is also control when certain melodies are playing. So let's go to an example and show that. Oh, I hear it already.
That's me. Get ready for some music. Okay, hold on. Let's get rid of that noise. There we go. All right.
Perfect.
So what do we do, Eduardo?
So very simple, actually. Let's go to the input and add a button. So actually, before we do that, also, can I have like the start basic block on here first? I completely forgot, but this is always very good practice on start to set things at the beginning so you don't have to deal with them later in the code. So we want to, like you heard in that sound, it was kind of loud. So let's set that. So let's go to the music block and let's set the volume to 30 right at the beginning, so we don't hurt our ears when we start playing this. So perfect. So
you can either use that or you can type it.
Right. So let's go to the forever block now. On the basic blocks.
Yep.
The forever loop. There we go. And the idea here is that we want, right when the game starts, we want to just have a melody to play in the background over and over again. So when we go back to music, we'll go to the play melody block, and we'll put that inside the forever loop. And the cool thing about this is that if you click on the little keynote there, you can actually make your own beat or your own music down here using these blocks, or we can just go and pick for the gallery. So because I'm not very talented when it comes to music, I'm just gonna rob one of these, and you can pick whatever you want here.
Ooh, let's
Paris
do
sounds
hopeful.
kind of hopeful sounds good.
Let's do
Yeah,
hopeful.
hopeful sounds good. Hope sounds good because that's
Okay.
you gotta be hopeful. So we'll keep the tempo here at 120. So tempo is how you speed up a melody or slow it down. 120 is like the preferred speed, so we're gonna keep it there. So now that you hear the music playing, now we can probably pause it for now on the thing.
So we gotta pull it out.
Okay, we'll pull it out. So now we want to be able to control things like volume. So let's take out the inputs and put an A and B input here on the canvas. Excellent. So now on A, we're gonna have it to set back to what we had it. So let's put set volume to 30 under A. You can just copy it from the on start.
So yeah, to copy, you can just do Control-C, Control-V, that same kind of shortcut key to copy paste. So that's how I just did that there. Or you can go back to music and find it again and pull it from those.
Yep. So we're gonna copy and paste another set volume block. But this time we're gonna put it on the B and we're gonna set that to 120. So now if we put back the play melody on forever, with the buttons, we should be able to change the volume. So now if we press the B button after replace, you should hear the volume go up. There we go. And then turn it back down with A. Perfect. Now if you hit the square right under the editor, you should be able to pause it all together. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay. No. Let's just okay. Perfect.
Oh, there we go. We're good.
There we go. So now what about stopping the music without doing all of this like glitchy stuff that we were just trying to do? So let's take another input block and let's set that one to AB. So now when you press both buttons. So what we want to set it here is that when both buttons are pressed to stop the music. So let's put the set volume block in here and set that to 0. Perfect. And then what we can do there is use another basic block and say that it will only stop for 5 seconds. So on the pause, we will set that to 5 seconds. So it's in milliseconds, so it will be, or yeah, 5 seconds is fine. And then after that, we want to set the volume back to the normal. So we'll set volume to 30 after the pause. Excellent. So now if we play it again, let's go through this code together. So now the melody is playing. Now when we press the B button, it should increase. A button, it should decrease. And AB should stop it for 5 seconds. So this is great because now you also know that you're able to interact now with the forever loop as well and interact with things that are running in the background. So I think that's it for the music block. Let's continue and talk about the LED blocks now.
Right, and let's turn this off. Great. All right, so now back to LEDs. Great. So the LED blocks are what allow you to control each of the LEDs on the MicroBit. So when we were making those heart shapes and like the happy faces, all those things, those are being made on each of those LEDs. So it's kind of this grid of a bunch of LEDs, and we can turn on and off whichever ones we want. So each of these LEDs, the way we know which one to turn on and off is because the MicroBit treats them kind of like little points on a graph. So they have what's called a coordinate. So you might have learned in school, when you do graphs on an X and Y axis, each of the points on your graph has a coordinate, which is that point in X and Y space. And you can tell essentially the MicroBit to turn on and off those different coordinates. The way that the MicroBit graphs out all of these LEDs is with this kind of convention here, where you're increasing your number along the x-axis going right and increasing along the y-axis by going down. So what does that really mean when we go to the MicroBit? So here's what we're going to do. Let's just go do it. So let's go back to our little canvas here. Let's delete our previous stuff so we can start fresh. And let's make sure this is up. All right, so we want to go back to on start. So essentially what I want to do right now is just to make it so that we plot we make one LED turn on at a specific location just when you start the MicroBit up. So that's why I'm using the on start. So now when we go to the LED blocks and we look at all the different blocks that are available here, I just want to plot an X and Y coordinate. So that block fits right in there. So let's say I want to turn on, so right now it's compiled the code, which means that the code has gone to the microbit, and now the microbit's actually functioning. Right now what it's showing is that first LED on the top left-hand corner is on. And so that's the LED with coordinate 0, 0, which means that its X point is 0, or X value is 0, and its Y value is 0. So one thing with coding and a lot of different coding languages is that we start counting numbers from 0, not 1. So even though this is like the first LED on the left and the first on the top, it's actually the 0th LED is what we would say. The first one, let's say if we want to make it so, this top left corner isn't lit, but let's say the one to the right of it is lit, we need to set that X coordinate now to 1, which is that second point, in our coding talk. So now that we look at the microbit, we see that the second LED is turned on, and the Y coordinate is still 0, which means it's on that top row. So now let's say, for example, we want to set it so the middle LED in this microbit is turned on. Does anyone, let's see if this works in the chat, if people are really fast, does anyone know what we should set the X and Y coordinates to make that middle LED turn on? Got a quick answer right away. Great. So if we set it to 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. So okay, let's try it out. Let's see what happens when we set it to 3, 3. So the microbit turns black and white when it's compiling, and then okay. So it actually moved it down kind of into the right-hand-ish corner. Okay, so why would that be? Why is that 3, 3? So if you remember, we count that first location as 0. So 3, 3 is actually that fourth location to the right and fourth location down. Because we're counting, if you're following my mouse cursor right now is on 0.00. If we move it 1 to the right, that's going to be 1, 0. And then if we keep on moving it, it's going to go up. So yeah, I'm seeing the chat change their minds here to 2, 2. Yeah, so because we're counting from 0, we actually have to do 2, 2. So if we do that, let the microbit compile, and yeah, so now it's in the center. Great. And so, moving on from this, if you want to make it so another LED turns on, let's say 0, 0 and 2, 2, you can just keep stacking these blocks up. And so that's an example of, creating a bunch of different unique patterns with LEDs. So I think that's good for LEDs for now. So let's check out radios.
So radio blocks are super cool because radio blocks actually allow you to kind of interact with another friend if you both have microbits. Because one, it allows you to only send information, but it also allows you to receive information back. So let's take an example of the code here. So we're going to make something super simple. So we're going to start with the A button input. Perfect. And inside the A button, we're going to go to the radio blocks and take the radio send number block and put it inside the A. And we're going to set that to 1. So far what this is saying is when I press A, I'm going to send this number to another microbit. But we also want to do something when we receive information back, right? So we go back to the radio blocks, and we're going to choose now the on radio received number block. Perfect. And now we're going to go back to the basic blocks and take the show string block, and then we're going to type in a hello. Perfect. So far what this is saying is that when I press A, I will send a number out. But then when I receive some type of number, whatever number that is, my screen will display hello. So now when we go to the play button, it's actually something really cool happens. When you click on the play, actually 2 microbits show up. So now you're able to test this in a real scenario without having to have 2. So if we press A on the red one, we'll see that the hello is displayed on the green one. So when you press on the green one, hello is displayed on the red one. So there's a cool example of how 2 friends could communicate back and forth by sending little inputs through this radio component. So this is really cool, and I really hope that you guys integrate this somehow in your project if you can. But for now, this is all that we're going to cover for radio. So let's now take a look at variable blocks.
Great. All right, so variable blocks are the next one we want to talk about because they come in really handy for the following other blocks that we're going to talk about. So variables help you store information that you can use later. So they generally store numbers so that you can add and subtract variables from each other the same way you kind of add and subtract numbers. So the reasons for this is that, let's say you want to do a bunch of addition, subtraction, multiplication, anything like that, but you also want values to kind of change, or they're changing in your code at different points. It's really nice to have them stored into variables so you can just call on that variable rather than all these numbers that are always changing, because the variable name will always stay the same. And the variable is something you can name yourself. So for example, we're going to go through this. We can create a new variable, and then I'll have a few options of what to do with it. So always make your variable with a descriptive name. So let's just go to Microsoft MakeCode. Then let's go through that process. Okay, so we're going to go to the variable blocks. Let's create a variable. So for this example, we're actually going to do something where we're going to wait till the microbit counts up to a certain number before it outputs LEDs, like outputs a check mark in our case. So I want something that's counting up in terms of my variable. So I'm going to call it a counter. It doesn't matter what you call it, as long as it's something that makes sense in your code. So it's easier for not just yourself to read it, but for your future self to read it if you're looking at your code later and you forget what you did, or for other people to read it as well. So I just made this variable called counter right now. So what I want to do is that I want to make it so that, for this example, this is just my idea of what we could do. I want to make it so that when we shake the microbit, the counter will go up by one number, and it'll keep on adding one number as long as we shake it. And once we shake it 5 times, then the microbit will spit out a check mark. So what we want to do first, like Eduardo mentioned before, is that we want to make sure that we initialize different things right at the start of our project. And the reason for this, especially with variables, is because if you have a variable that has a certain value, you want to make sure that that value is known at the start of your code, so that you can work up from then on, rather than saying what your variable is in the middle of your code. So this will make a bit more sense as we go along, but let's go to the variables. Let's say we're going to set our counter, which is that variable we created. So if I click on this dropdown, you can create new variables, you can rename your variables, etc. So I want to set this variable called counter to 0. So now the microbit knows this variable is 0. That's what we start with. And who knows, later in the code, we might change that variable value, but for now it knows it's 0. So next, what I want to do is I want to say, okay, let's take an input of a shake, which is I'm going to shake the microbit. Every time I shake it, I want that counter to add 1 to itself. So now we can go to the variables again. And so there's the other option here in variables of change counter, which is our variable, by 1. And then, of course, you can create new variables. You can do whatever you want. So what this is doing is that every time we shake the microbit, we're actually going to make the counter add 1 to itself. So it starts out at 0. We shake it, it'll be 1. We shake it again, it'll be 2, etc. And now I want to make it so the microbit knows when it reaches 5, we'll output a check mark. So what we're going to do first is create a forever loop. And the forever loop is so that can keep on checking the value of counter. We're going to essentially put code into this forever loop such that the microbit will always keep checking what is the value of counter right now. And so it knows that once it reaches 5, it has to do something. We're going to talk about this, very soon. We haven't covered it yet, but we have to use a logic block right now. So I'm going to put it in here. We won't talk about it too much because we need to, Eduardo will speak about it in a bit. But essentially, I want to check when the counter equals 5. So what I can do here is use what's called an if statement. It's going to ask, well, if my counter equals 5, then spit out a check mark. So you can put different values in these 2 positions of 0 here. Your variable, remember, is like a number, so you can actually fit that right in here. So if counter equals 5, so I'll just type in a 5 there, and then let's just show the check mark icon. So I'll put that in there and then change it to check mark. So now when I run the microbit, what I do is I can shake it by pressing the shake button, or physically shaking your microbit. So I'll press that once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. So now I've shaken it 5 times. We see that check mark come through. One thing also that I do want to mention here, that's useful when you have really big amounts of code that you're unsure what's going on. There's this thing called the debug console, or they call it the debug mode here. So it looks like a little bug that's right next to that refresh sign here. If you click on that, it takes you into this kind of different environment. It turns orange, so you know you're in your debug mode. And now what you can do is that it can tell you what's happening to these variables as you're shaking your microbit or whatever you're doing. So the nicest thing to press is the snail icon up here, which is called slow-mo. It makes it so that your code runs really slow and it'll go automatically. So it also has this yellow outline showing what current part of your code's on. So now let's do the exact same thing we were doing before. We're shaking their microbit. So I click on shake. So you saw how it went to that shake block very quickly and then went back into the forever loop because it's keeping on checking what the counter value is. And also we see underneath the snail icon, the different variables. We have counter here, and you see its value equals to 1. So if we continue to shake it, what we see is that the counter value continues to go up. So it's 3, now it's 4, and now it's 5. And once it reaches 5, we know that it has to show the icon. So this is a nice way if you're getting lost with a lot of different code and you're trying to figure out how to do something very specifically, and it's really complicated to think through. Using this debug mode can a lot of times help to kind of know what's really happening to your variables. And then make sure to exit your debug mode with this big button right here so you can get back into your code and add more things. So that's a little introduction to variables. So let's look at some logic.
Perfect. So logic blocks are really helpful because they allow you to use conditional arguments like if statements to control the flow of events. But it also allows you to compare between variables, numbers, or even words to kind of trigger different events. So let's take a look at that inside MakeCode. So what we're going to do is do something very simple. We're going to first we're going to put the onStart basic block. And because we want to initialize a couple of things. So we're going to make a variable. We're going to set that to on. We're going to name a variable called on. And then we're going to put that in the start. We're going to set the on. And then we're going to go to our logic blocks and we're going to use the false and set that and set the variable to false. So on start, we're going to put it in here, and then the variable automatically gets set to false. So as you said there, most of the codes that we've been looking for kind of fit like a puzzle piece. But here we have like this weird shape fitting into the circular shape. Doesn't make any sense. But that's okay. You can actually see by that little tether, that white line connecting it to, that tells you what can and can't go in there. So if you don't see that line, you're not supposed to put it in there. So in this case, this works. So we can set this variable to false, and we can put like a smiley face there, but just go into the basic blocks just for sake of, and then show icon. Perfect. So just for sake of consistency, when you start, we'll see the smiley face, but at the background, you'll see that it'll set the variable to false. So the next step now is to then create it for, we'll take the inputs first. So let's take an input, an A button input, and a B button input. And on A button, we're going to borrow the same set variable to blocks and put them in each of these. Perfect. And now for the B button, we're actually going to switch that to true. So it's very simple here, because now when you start the program, it's going to be set to false. But as you click the buttons, they will go between false and true, depending on what button you're pressing. So let's make this a little bit more interesting and add the forever loop from the basic group blocks. And then we're going to put in an if statement, as Surath previously mentioned. Yeah, is okay. That's perfect. And then we're also gonna need an if and elif. So to get the elif, you have to click the plus button, and now we see that elif available. And now we're gonna get rid of that else by clicking the minus button right beside it. Perfect. So now on the if, we're gonna go back to the logic blocks, and we're gonna go to the comparison blocks. Yep, and get the first one, which is 0 equals to 0, and put it right in there inside the true. Now we're going to go ahead and put the variable on inside the first 0 in there. Excellent. Then we're going to go back to the logic buttons and go to the true and put that equal. So now what that's saying in the background is checking when the variable on equals to true, this is going to happen. So right underneath that, what we're going to add is that we're going to add just another icon. So we're going to put another show icon block in there. You can pick any random icon. The hardest one. So, okay, that's perfect. So now we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the same block that we have on the if, but on the elif, but not for the opposite condition. Now it's going to check if it's off. And now this happens instead. So we're going to take another show icon and put it under there. And it has to be a different shape. Perfect. And now if we test the code, what's going to happen is, depending on what button we press, it's going to show up a different shape. So now because it starts off false, it's going to go to the square. But if we click the B button, it's going to go to the other shape. And if you click A again, it's going to go back to the square. So now it's able to toggle between two different type of events, depending on what conditions you set it at. So if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer these at the Q&A. But for now, let's continue and look at the loop blocks now. Now, loop blocks are really interesting because these allow you to repeat events over and over again. And you're able to actually set them, and you're actually able to control them too by setting variables or other conditional statements like true and false. So let's go back to MakeCode and let's see what we can do with these. Okay, excellent. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we are going to take the B and the A inputs in the canvas. Now for the A input, we're going to do something very simple. We're going to go to the loop group of blocks, and we're going to take the repeat 4 times block. So the repeat 4 times right at the top, that one. So what this is saying is that when you click the A button, something's going to repeat 4 times. So let's make it super simple, and let's go to the basic block and take the show icon block, put one there, and let's put a second one right underneath. Perfect. And then, yeah, let's make that one a different shape. So when we go test it and we click the A button, it should cycle between these two things 4 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it stops there. Perfect. So that's a very standard loop, but let's look at something more challenging, which is a for loop. So we'll go back to the loop menu, yep, and let's go to the for, there we go, and put that in the B. So this is very interesting because, as you say here, that index is, you can take that as a variable. And what it's doing is that it'll go from a set range. So right now we have it going between 0 to 4. So what that means that it'll go from 0, and when this is 0, it'll store that 0 inside that variable. Then it'll loop again and then go to 1, and then 1 will be set onto the index variable instead. So in order to show that, we'll go to the show number in the basic block group. Yep, show number.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. And then we're going to put the index variable inside the 0. So the index variable, yeah, perfect. So now when we test it and we click the B button, it should go from 0 all the way to 4, because every number is getting saved on the index every time as it loops. So this can be very helpful when you're trying to set up events and you want them to be displayed in a variable as well. You can also save them and also have something repeat in the background at the same time. So that's it for loops. So let's move on and look at the math blocks now.
Great. All right, let's put that back up. Great. So math, as you can guess, allows you to do math. So when coding, math becomes very useful and powerful because, to combine different variables, to convert different values. A lot of times you will be dealing with numbers, and this is, using these different operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division come in very handy. And you can do math on variables. So we're going to do a quick example here. So I'll show it to you here first. What I want to do is I want to show what the temperature is in Celsius, in degrees Celsius, which is something that MicroBit can do because it has a little sensor that can detect temperature, and we can see it virtually on our MicroBit. But then next, I want to use some math to convert that Celsius temperature by pressing the B button into a Fahrenheit temperature. And so for this, we need to know the equation to convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit, which is essentially this right here, where the Fahrenheit value equals 1.8 multiplied by your Celsius value, and then you add 32 to it. So we're going to try that out, see what it looks like. You can see what it looks like right there. And let's delete these. Great. So let's start first by showing that Celsius value by pressing the button A. So we take our press on button A pressed. And then we want to show string right here. So showing the string just means showing just like a list of characters, which is just going to be our number. And we want to show the temperature. So there should be a temperature value in our inputs right here. So this is like a built-in variable that will show right there. So now when we turn on our MicroBit right here, we press A, it's showing the temperature as 21 degrees. And then it's kind of cool, this little temperature thermometer comes up on the side. You can actually change it around too. So let's just make it like that, and it'll show the value. So essentially, this will show the actual value of the temperature of the room that you're in. So that's it in Celsius. So as you can see, there's only the temperature in Celsius. There's no Fahrenheit. So how do we show that Fahrenheit? So well, let's make it so when you press button B, you can see your Fahrenheit temperature. So now we have to do some math. So we need to take that Celsius temperature, multiply by 1.8, and then we have to add 32 to it. So let's first start with showing a string. It's right here. And then let's just take our Celsius value. So now we need to multiply 1.8 to it. So if we go into our math, multiplication is right here. So we can take that. I'm just going to keep it outside of the block for now, just so we can do all the math together. So we want to take our temperature, put it in there. We want to multiply it by 1.8. Great. And now we want to add 32 to it. But remember, if you remember your order of operations, we're doing our temperature times 1.8 and then taking that whole value and adding 32 to it. So to do that, we go back to our math, we take the addition. So now we have something plus something else. We want to take this whole temperature times 1.8 as one operation there, and then we want to add 32 to it. So now we see it's temperature times 1.8 first, then we add 32. So now we can just slot this whole, oops, that fell out. We can slot this whole thing into our position there. It just overwrote the hello. The hello is just there by default. And now it's going to show the string of our Fahrenheit value. So now when we turn on our microbit, when we press B, we see it shows the temperature in Fahrenheit. And if we change it to, let's, something colder, we can then try it again. Oh, we have to let it kind of do its thing. Oh. Okay, I wanted to wait before I talked about this, but you see right now it's showing a bunch of zeros coming by after it showed the temperature in Fahrenheit. And so this is because the microbit has its ability to store a very large numbers. So pretty much what it showed the temperature 0.00000 all the way up to how much memory it has to store that value for. So we don't always really want to see that. Because that's just, that's too much to look at once, and it can be kind of confusing. So another thing we could do in our math is that we can round the numbers. So we can round the number up to its closest value, so we can get rid of those decimal points. So now it's put that whole thing within the round, put that round back in here. Let's move it down here so we can see it. So now when we run through microbit and press B, it'll round it to 70. So we see that the temperature is 70 Fahrenheit and the Celsius is 21 if we press button A. So that's essentially it for math. You can definitely do lots of different operations and lots of different equations here with all those intricate connections of blocks. And so that's what we were showing here. And now just very briefly, as we're running closer to the end and we want to get time for questions, we do have these things called advanced blocks. So on the microbit, it's the last section there. It's a drop-down menu where you can click on all these different types of additional blocks which have more complex operations. So it allows you to do more complicated math. You can do math on multiple numbers or different things at once. There's a lot of different operations you can do with what are called arrays, which is essentially just like very big lists of numbers, and you want to do lots of math all at the same time. You can deal with different text values too. You can create game characters. You can create little games. If you've heard of the program called Scratch, it's very similar to that. And also you can add different sensors to your microbits. So those on the microbit itself, if you recall, there's those 0, 1, 2, 3 pins on the bottom. Those are little things where you can clip on different sensors if you have them to your microbit, so you can work with those, and there's different controls for that. So we won't really go into that too much because we want to make sure everyone's comfortable with kind of the basic operations that can be used, because they're still very powerful to use. And to demonstrate all of these working together, we're going to go through just a short little demo of code that Eduardo put together. So do you want to describe that?
Yep. So we're running close a little bit on time. So I'm going to go through this quickly. But what I want to just kind of show everybody is kind of like how a typical project will be structured. So here we have a submission, an example of a submission of a virtual friend. So here on the start is very simple. They're kind of just setting up variables here at the start and setting up manifest at the beginning. And setting the variables on the start is very useful because you can just forget about them and deal with them right at the beginning, which is a very good thing to do. So now here on the AB, we actually don't know what this does, but if we click on the comment there on the corner, we see it's a handshake game, and it's like how to initialize it. So you press AB to initialize this game, and it also shows why it's important for all of you to put comments on your code, so it lets us know what you guys are doing. So let's go on to test, and let's click the AB button.
I pressed something bad.
Oh, you duplicated it?
Yeah. There we go. I just want to show that you can add a comment in by right-clicking on your block, and there's an add comment button.
Yeah, it's very easy. Yep. And now we'll go to test, and we'll click the AB button on the virtual MicroBit. And it looks like it's initializing the game on 1, 2, 3, and now it's ready to go. So let's press the A button, see what happens. We get a check mark. Let's click the B button. Another check mark, A button again. Another check mark, and then we get a little message that says cool. So what happened there is that once the AB is set, it initializes, it changes the variables to kind of let the program know, hey, we're starting a game. So now when you press the A button, if you look down in the canvas, in the code, the A and B button both have if conditions. So what it's doing is that it's actually creating a sequence where when it tells the program, hey, when A button is pressed, if A button is pressed after they originally picked the A button, that's the correct condition. Or if they press B, then that's not good. And this is constantly being checked in the forever loop here in the canvas, where it's constantly checking for these variables to see if they got a good hit or a bad hit. So if it's good, it'll get a check mark. If it's bad, then it's an X. And if they get all of the sequence completely correct, they'll display a cool message like we got. And if they get it wrong, they'll get like an awe, like a little disappointment. So the last thing I also want to bring up is at the very bottom, there's another component to this code in this forever loop, which is using light level. And the idea here, if you look at the comments in the forever loop, is that it's detecting hand wave. So it's essentially is when you wave at the MicroBit, it should display hello. And the way that we test this in the upper left here in the test, we actually can choose the light level. So when we drop it below a certain level set here, you can see that it's displaying hello. So what they're submitted here is essentially a friend is able to memorize a special handshake with you that will be really happy if you remember it, or really disappointed if you forgot, and is also able to interact with you and say hello when you say hello to it as well. So this is a typical example of what what kind of submissions we're looking for, because we're trying to create here a virtual friend that's able to keep company with somebody during quarantine and is able to interact with them in a certain way. And I also want to stress that although this person, whoever wrote this code, I'm naming names, did not put a lot of comments. So we want you guys to also let us know what's happening in your code by adding comments so we don't get lost and we're able to appreciate what you've done. So that's it for the demo. I think we can continue on the next slide. So now we're going to go into actually how to submit. So essentially, after you're done your code, you're going to click save and use it converted to a hex file. So once you have your hex file, you will go on to the SRHack website and click on the submission form. The submission form is not available today. I believe it will be up by the 13th of this month. So once that's up, you will have a form that looks like this. You will fill all the information, click what project you're submitting to. So for this one, you will click programming, and then you'll have the option to upload your hex file. So after you upload it, right in that same section, you'll have an option to write out your description. And this is a description that is mandatory, and that's where you're going to describe who your virtual friend is, how it's going to help people during quarantine, and what kind of difficulties you had when programming your code. And then there's also an additional submission, which is a diagram. So sometimes students like you might have like some really big ambitions that might not be properly displayed by what we have here in the hex file. So we do encourage you to like maybe draw a diagram of how this will look like in a real case scenario, so we can again really see and appreciate what you guys are trying to build to help people during quarantine. So that's it for this section. So if you continue, the last thing is that in our website, we're also going to have resources available. So these are the links to other tutorials, MakeCode documentation, and MakeCode actually has some really cool tutorials that you can also follow that will make available in the website sometime in the upcoming days. And this is the link to the website, and you can go ahead and link to that. And another really cool resource that I want to advertise here is our Discord. So we currently have a Discord where, there we go. So the link is on the chat, and you can come here to kind of find other people that might want to work with you on the same project. And also, if you have any other questions, we have helpful mentors there. They're able to answer your questions and kind of get a flow of what kind of projects you want to do, or how you should go about applying certain things for whatever you want to make your virtual friend trying to perform. So that's about it for the resources. I believe we're now at the end of the presentation. So we'll be now taking on any questions that you may have.
I think there might be a few questions already that our team compiled on the side from the chat.
Perfect. So let's take a look
start with that. Yeah, let's go back to the MakeCode interface. So we will probably be able to work on there. All right. So first question was how to save projects. So to save projects, so yeah, on the MakeCode interface, if you're going back to here, I do remember seeing briefly that, yeah, there is no account that you make, but it will save it on your computer. So that if you keep coming back to this website, everything will be here. But to be super safe, so that you have that file and you can always bring it to whatever computer you're going to be working on, what you can do is, so let's say you have your code all done, you can click on the download button here. So that will download. So it'll bring this up. It'll download it as a hex file, as Eduardo talked about. You can save it onto your computer, and then so let's say I save that. Now we go back to the MicroBit here, and there's this import button. So on any computer you're at, you can click import, and you can import a file. You can import it from a URL or from a GitHub repository. You can take that hex file you had, and you can bring it onto whatever computer you want to continue working on it. Cool. Actually, yeah, Eduardo, let's go question by question if you want to go next, and I'll go after.
Sure. So another question here is, one of the questions I want to address is actually to how to share your project. I think I already dropped a link for it down in the chat, but I'll drop it again. You can share your projects with your teammates. I'm not sure if you can code right at the same time, but what this is really helpful is, for example, if you have 3 people working on a project, you can both make edits, and everybody in your team will be able to see those edits. Just make sure that when you're making those edits, to make comments, put your name and say, I made this change, so everybody knows what you made. And also want to stress, to make this even simpler, is you can actually join our Discord, and there's actually little work desks that you can join, and you can all just kind of hang out there and work on your code together.
Great. Let me check another question. Are there any wait blocks? So that's a great question, because waiting or having delays in your code can be very useful. So there aren't actually any specific wait blocks, but what you can do is use a loop and have, the pause in your loop for a specific number or a certain number of time. And if you want, so you can, you put a pause block for up to 5 seconds, but if you want the wait to be longer than 5 seconds, you can make a loop around that. Let's say repeat 4 times. You add that into there. Now it's going to be 20 seconds instead in this example. So yeah, that's how you do waiting, which is, yeah, very useful in a lot of different code.
Another thing that I wanted to also mention is some people ask about Bluetooth. And of course, the MicroBit has the ability to connect to other hardware devices. But here's some documentation that I'm going to put here in the chat. And the idea here is that you're able to use Bluetooth, but I believe is that you have to make some changes to your interface, where you're going to have to actually download the specific blocks to use Bluetooth in your MakeCode code. So make sure to check that documentation out, and it'll help you out to where to find these blocks and how to work through the Bluetooth components here.
So yeah, just to show you, if at the bottom of the advanced panel, there's an extensions button, and then that's where you can get all the Bluetooth services. So you can add those in to your project.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. We're kind of running close on time. So go ahead, Surath.
Yeah. One question is, what does setting a variable to false do? So this kind of goes into another question of, variables can take on values of numbers, but also true and false. So there's different types of variables. So some variables can carry big numbers, some can carry only integers, some can carry true or false. These are called Boolean values. So if you set a variable to false, if you set it to false, the only other value you can have is true. So in your code, you can actually use this if you have a variable, let's say on is true or on is false, rather than on is 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. It'll just treat those values as such. So using true or false can be really useful in a lot of different code if you just want to flip between 2 different values for a variable.
Okay, so actually, I think we actually ran out of time. So if there's any more questions, everyone, you can feel free to again go. Oh, sorry, you want to say something?
One question, because it does seem like a lot of people are asking this one. How do you put the music together with the text? It plays after the text finishes loading. Okay, so this might be a limitation. I can't say 100%, but generally speaking, with the MicroBit, what's happening is that it can only do one function at a time. So if you think about how code works, it kind of works from top to bottom. So if it's writing text, and then you have music coming after it, it has to finish showing all of that text before the music can start. One way to maybe get around it is having your music always in your forever loop, and then you having your text display in a different loop, or like in a different button press or something like that, so that they can kind of work together. But if they're coming one after each other, then the music, or sorry, the words will have to finish before the next function comes up. So that's one thing to keep in mind actually with coding, and it does appear actually a lot.
Right on. Thank you.
Great, but yeah, if you guys have any more questions, because I'm sure you guys are starting your projects, you're really excited, and then there's so many different things you can do. You can be super creative about this. That's where our Discord is for. I think primarily that Discord channel will be really useful for you guys to pass around ideas, ask questions, and get some guidance there. Great. Cool. Okay, so that's it for now. So it's actually 1, so stay online if you're going to stay around for the engineering design workshop, which will be for the next hour. Great. So I think, so that's it for myself and Eduardo. So yeah, thanks for coming by to the MakeCode workshop. And we'll now pass it off to Mimi and Ben.
Thank you. So we're going to have Ben share his screen now. So Surath, if you can.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Ben just left.
Let me get it. No, I'm still here.
You're here.
All right. Let me know if you guys can see this.